Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great session in our first series of American English Live Teacher Development. My name is Moderator Kate, as many of you know, and I'll be with you behind the scenes today, along with my colleagues, Moderator Lauren and Moderator Heather. They will be here to help answer any questions you may have. And today our host, John Mark King, will be talking with English language specialist Peter Edwards about his presentation, The Pinwheel, a classroom design for boosting social learning. We hope you're excited and ready to be inspired by a lot of great tips and tricks for your classroom. So let's go ahead and get started by welcoming our host, John Mark King. Welcome, John Mark.
Hi, Kate. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I'm super excited about today's event. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and our participants are going to learn some really useful classroom practices.
I agree. I'm excited too.
Well, welcome everybody to the 5th session in our exciting new series, American English Live Teacher Development. We're super happy to have you here today. Sessions are held every other Wednesday at 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time from Washington, D.C. It's really, really great to see many of you here again. And if you're here for the very first time, welcome. We're glad to see you. My name is John Mark King, and I work here in Washington, D.C. at the Office of English Language Programs, and I'm also part of the American English social media team. I'm very happy to be your facilitator and your host today. I have to tell you, we love to see teachers learning and exchanging ideas because we're teachers ourselves. And I want to send a very special thank you to Rohani Sianpar and her viewing group from Universitas Bayangkara, Jakarta Raya, Indonesia, for submitting this photo that you see right here of them participating in our 2nd session this series. We want to see your photos, so please, please share your viewing photos by emailing them to the address on the screen, americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org. You send them to us, we just might feature them in our next session. Speaking of sessions, let's take a look at our schedule for the whole series. As you see, we only have one session remaining after today. That one will focus on creative ways to engage EFL learners with new vocabulary through games. We look forward to seeing you for that session, which will be on March 28th at 8 a.m. or 1 p.m. We're very excited to announce our schedule for American English Live Series 2. The next series starts on May the 2nd, right here on the American English for Educators Facebook page. You can expect more great content with English language specialists on topics like technology and education, classroom management, and using authentic materials in your classroom. So we hope that you'll join us for those sessions as well. And about our sessions, they're each about 60 minutes long, depending on how much we talk, and you'll be able to respond to the presenter's questions in the comment box below. Every session is related to a theme that you can find on the American English website or in an exciting new American English eTeacher MOOC, or Massive Open Online Course. The Teacher's Corner section from the website has resources and lesson ideas that are all related to this month's topic, which is movement in the classroom. Speaking of movement, we'd like to invite you to be part of our Movable Class campaign. We want to know, how do you include movement in your classroom activities? Show us through our #MovableClass campaign. Take a video of yourself in your classroom describing your class activity. Make sure it's about 1 minute or less. Tell us, my students move when we blank, and then you finish. Then post the video to our American English for Educators Facebook page, or email it directly to americanenglish@state.gov. There are more details in the events section of our page. We cannot wait to see how you incorporate movement and fun into your classroom, so please send us your videos. Also, registration for the next American English eTeacher MOOC starts on March the 19th, which is very soon. This online course is 100% free. That means no cost at all. And it's called Using Educational Technology in the English Language Classroom. It's designed to prepare TESOL professionals, that's us, that's you, to integrate language learning tools into their English language teaching. Participants will become aware of free technology tools. They'll learn how to use the tools for language learning and teaching, and also evaluate the appropriateness of a technology tool for their specific context. It starts on April 16th, so register now and get more information and register for free at www.aeeteacher.org/MOOC. Registration actually starts on March the 19th. So, as many of you know, today you're going to have an opportunity to receive a digital badge from our team right here at American English for Educators. At the end of the session, we'll give you a link to complete a short quiz to receive your digital badge, which is like an electronic certificate. You have to answer 2 out of 3 multiple questions correctly and also respond to a short answer question. You can only enter information 1 time, so please take your time, be very careful, make sure you read each question very, very closely. You should receive your badge after you finish within about a week by email. Okay, finally, today's event, the Pinwheel, a classroom design for boosting social learning. During today's event, Peter will introduce and describe the rationale for using the pinwheel structure. He'll demonstrate a lesson which puts the approach into action so that you'll be ready to use it in your own classrooms. He's also going to focus on how this approach can maximize students' talk time while rotating contact and ideas amongst classmates. It's very exciting. So it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Peter Edwards. He's originally from Washington, D.C., but Peter holds an MA in literature from UC Berkeley and a PhD in applied linguistics from the University of Nottingham. His career began in Poland, but he spent the past 24 years teaching and researching in East Asia. Study abroad and neurodidactic told some of his current focus. He's a founding associate with the academics supporting Korogocho ASK building school programs in Nairobi, Kenya. He recently consulted in Cali, Colombia as an English language specialist and currently advises a graduate program at Mount Kenya University in Kigali, Rwanda. His next position, though, is at a university in Saudi Arabia. He's extraordinarily busy. Peter, welcome. I'm glad that you have time to be with us today, considering how incredibly busy you are. How are you today?
Oh, thank you so much for that lovely, wonderful introduction, John Mark. I'm doing well, and I don't think I'm any busier than most of us, but it is a little bit late for us. I'm in Japan now, so you're in the middle of the day and I'm in the middle of the night. But how are you doing today?
I'm doing really, really great. Thanks. I tell you what, we're eager to hear what the Pinwheel is. It sounds like it's going to be really interesting and really practical for our participants. And so thanks again for being here.
Thank you, John Mark, and let's get started. If we could start with our first slide there that has the title, of course. If you notice up in the upper left-hand corner of the slide, you'll see some arrows and a few dots. What I'd like you all to do, all the participants, and you too, John Mark, draw that little symbol. And I hope that by the end of our presentation today, we'll understand it a little bit more, what the symbol means and what the pinwheel is. We're going to give a definition of the pinwheel in just a couple of moments, but we've had some interesting comments from some people already on the site. We have Godwin Kaya, who's talked about mixing personalities and how that's really important. We'll talk a little bit about that among our students. We have Huang Tran, who's said that sometimes there are some problems with students just gossiping and not staying on topic. We're going to look at all of these and see how the pinwheel as a structure might be able to help some of these problems. A few participants have also noticed some similarities between the idea of the pinwheel and something called the jigsaw. And although they have some similarities, there's a basic difference where the jigsaw, just like a jigsaw puzzle, is putting pieces together into one thing. The pinwheel is kind of like taking them apart. John Mark, do you know those cube puzzles?
Yeah, of course. They're like called a Rubik's Cube, right?
Ah, yes, yes. Well, someone usually gives it to you and then you have to find the right order for everything. The pinwheel's kind of the reverse. We give it to you in one order and then students can mix it up in thousands or millions of different ways.
Well, that I can do. I can definitely mess up a Rubik's Cube. That's easy. So I look forward to hearing about it in
then
class.
hopefully the pinwheel will be for you. Great. Let's move to our first slide and give a little bit of background. Great. The theoretical background for the pinwheel comes from something called the contact hypothesis. But we're not going to talk about it very much today because we're going to talk about classroom practical things. But very quickly, in 1954, Gordon Allport created a hypothesis about how to bring different groups of people together. And what he said is you can't just push them together, but you have to have certain conditions. And he listed 5, and those are right there: equal status, which is really important for us, common goals, cooperation, authority support, and friendship potential. Those will be kind of the beginnings of the pinwheel.
What do you mean, Peter, by authority support?
Good question, John Mark. Authority support in the classroom, basically it kind of means the teacher, that the teacher is supporting the idea of bringing the students together, putting them into contact. We, as the authority in the classroom, are really pushing, supporting the idea of contact and not the idea of separating students and having them just working alone. Maybe in a government, that might be the authority support, or in a business, it might be the higher management. It doesn't really matter, except in the context of what we're talking about. So in the classroom, the teachers, we are the authority to support.
Got it. That makes sense. So with the pinwheel, it's a way of getting students to interact where these conditions here are met.
Yes. The arena of the classroom, I like the word arena for a classroom, needs some conditions that really help overcome shyness, overcome students just talking in a small group with their friends. So that's our job. And these conditions have proved helpful for me using this in the classroom.
Great.
So if we can move on, basically the objectives for today are to define the pinwheel, as we already started, as a framework for mixing groups, for having contact learning and learning from each other in the classroom. Also to raise individual talking time. And we say here, spotlight talk time, because we're talking about one student getting a certain amount of time, as much as possible in each class, where they have the spotlight, right? They are being focused on by people in their small group. So we're trying to raise that talk time in the classroom, because we know a lot of our students, they don't speak the language outside of class. This is their one time. So we really need to increase that as much as possible. A second objective is to take a topic and to divide it up and prioritize it. That's kind of like what I was talking about the cube. How we can kind of mix it up and then have the students put it together in lots of different ways and get more utility and originality from topics that way.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, today we're going to talk about 2 pieces of the pinwheel that kind of work together. The first one is what promotes contact learning, and I'm guessing that means when the students come together, it's a way of like getting them to talk by being in contact with each other.
Yes, they're getting together, but very often when we have one idea, if we don't share it with other people, it doesn't really develop. Mm-hmm. And the idea is to get students' ideas to develop by having them contact each other. Later on today, we'll go through a lesson and show how that can develop. But first, we need to learn some more basics about the pinwheel.
Okay, and then the other thing that you'll talk about is how to organize the content for the lesson so that students also learn more effectively and communicate more effectively.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how you can take one kind of big topic and kind of chop it up into little pieces that the students can then organize into countless different ways.
Exciting. So I can't wait.
Okay, me too. Let's move on. I think we have our first discussion question. So I'll pose it to all of you out there. How content, how happy are we as teachers to have only our top students answering our questions. It's a common kind of thing when we just say, okay, who knows the answer? And the same 2 or 3 people always raise their hands and answer, and then a lot of others don't. How content are we with this?
So we want our participants to write their answers in the chat box, right?
Yes, please. We'd love to
Okay,
hear.
well, I know I can answer myself as a teacher. I'm definitely
Yes.
not content. It's important to me that everybody feel like they can speak, but it certainly happens. It certainly does happen.
Yeah, it's a challenge for all of us. And as teachers, we're often happy just to have somebody answer our questions. So even if it's the same people, sometimes we are a little bit happy with that. But we're going to try to have more people, everybody really participating.
Well, one of our viewers, Joshua, says, I feel bad in the situation because my shy students don't get very much of an opportunity to talk.
Yes, that can happen. And some of our really excited, good students might just dominate the class. That's why I like small groups and I like individually spotlighting students so we can all be sure that everybody is speaking in every class.
And also Nadina Nicolici says, not so happy. She wants everyone to try and answer. I think all of us can agree with that.
Yes.
And
exactly.
Ramona writes, she's only about 30% content. Put a number on it.
Well, let's see if we can raise that percentage a little bit with these activities. I hope so. Can we move to our second question? Yeah. Again, to all of our participants, how much do you think our students, your students, really care about the school subject, the subject of the class, and how much do they really care about their friends, their friendships with the other students? What do you think?
Well, speaking personally, my experience as a teacher and as a student, friendships are much more important than the school subjects, which is interesting because aren't we there because of the subjects, right? But it's true that our students tend to put more energy into their friendships with their other classmates.
Yeah, that is true. We're there for the subject, but we'll talk about it in just a moment. We're kind of very social as humans. We like to get together. That's why things like Facebook are so very popular. We like contacting. So the Pinwheel is trying to use that energy and say, how can we attach learning the subject with this big burning energy that students have towards friendships? And that's what the goal is of the Pinwheel, is to bring those two things closer together. Let's move on if we can. Very, very briefly, I'll talk about my first contact with teaching. I taught in a prison, actually, in an adult literacy program. And my first student, his name was Sid, and I learned a lot from him. I was supposed to be the teacher, but I learned a lot from him. One of the things that I learned is that not having freedom is a really terrible, terrible thing. And that's something that we can maybe bring to our students in our classroom, give them a bit more freedom. We'll talk more about that as this goes on, but also Sid was about 3 times older than I was and had a very different background. And so it was hard for us to think of things to talk about. And so we had unequal status. We didn't have anything to talk about. And it was really tough. We were both cautious with each other. So the Pinwheel is a way to try to change those kinds of conditions that I first met when I first started teaching.
So it sounds to me like what you're suggesting is that with the Pinwheel, we can take kind of an unnatural environment like the classroom and create conditions that make it easy for people to behave as if they're just having a conversation with a friend.
Well, that's a great way of putting it, John Mark. Yeah, we try to have the environment be exactly more what we're used to and what we like. Why not? We actually learn very well when we're just getting along with friends. Why break away from our natural instincts? Let's find ways to incorporate our natural instincts along with learning. So if we can move on, as teachers, I use this acronym because it's nice and easy to remember of SOAP, S-O-A-P, and that stands for Students Original Abundant Production. And I like to keep that in my mind as I am thinking about organizing my class. I want my classes to be as soapy as possible. What I mean by original is that the students are creating their own sentences, their own things that they're saying. They're not being just like a parrot, just repeating what somebody else has said or just reading something, but they're actually producing language. And when I say abundant, I'm talking about trying to get every student every hour to be speaking at least 7 minutes, at least 7 minutes of production of original language. So that's always the goal, the soapy goal that I have when I'm organizing, designing my classes.
So this doesn't mean that you should keep your classroom clean. This is something else. This is an acronym to remember one key important piece of the Pinwheel, right?
Absolutely. A clean classroom is always good.
Sure, clean classroom is always good, for sure.
I just want to keep something that's easy to remember and always try to ask myself, is this class soapy enough?
Great.
Okay, we can move on. We just talked a little bit just before about how animals are social, humans are social. Most animals are. We survive together, whether it's wolves or monkeys there or even fish. We need each other to survive. And we have that strong instinct. And as we just started talking about, why not tap into that instinct? Just like wolves and monkeys love to be together, humans love to be together. So why not use that energy when we are learning? We can move on to a second part of this. We talked about SOAP. Another acronym that I use is thinking about the students and what they want. We talked about friendship before. I call this aspect of the Pinwheel AIR, A-I-R, meaning our students' real desire to attract intergroup respect. What that means is they kind of want to get respected by other people in the class. They want to get along. They want to have friendships. And if we look at the word respect, re and spect, it kind of means to get looked at again, to get noticed again. That's what they really want. They want to come out of the classroom thinking, wow, I met lots of people from different groups and they respected me, they liked me. If they get that, then learning's going to happen. They're going to feel better. They're going to feel less shy or cautious. So we have to remember, we as teachers want soap and the students really want air.
Well, so Peter, Svetlana Podhamutnikova says, if you choose a good topic to talk about for teens, they'll do it with pleasure. It won't feel like work. And I think that's probably a very important piece of the Pinwheel, but it's probably not all of the Pinwheel, is it?
No, it's not all, and I applaud you on the pronunciation of that name. That was wonderful, John Mark. But yes, if you choose a good topic, however, sometimes it's a challenge because we have all of these different personalities in one class, and maybe they're not interested, everybody, in the same topic. The Pinwheel tries to chop up topics so that everybody can have their own individual relationship with the topic. But yeah, we always want to try to find things that the students are interested in, but sometimes it's a little difficult. The Pinwheel tries to be able to take any topic and allow the students to make something unique with it. Okay, so if we have soap and if we have air, what do we get? Bubbles. And so I try to always think, how bubbly is my classroom? And if you look up on the slide, how soapy is the quieter half. Let's always look at the quieter half. How are they doing in every class? and abundant, as we spoke before. We're trying to get about 7 minutes out of every student every hour, and longer utterances, meaning like sentences, what they say, at least 7 words, not just yes, uh-huh, okay, me too. That's not really producing very much. We want to get longer. Even the lower levels, they can still put enough together for a 7-word speaking time. We can do that. We can do that.
And so then, when you say the quieter half, does that mean that we assume that the non-quiet half is already doing okay?
Well, sometimes it's only 2 or 3 students that are really doing well, but I think I'm being a little nice when I say half of the class. But sometimes it could be as much as 80% of the class is saying very, very little.
Well, language learning is really difficult, isn't it? It's easy to be quiet.
It is, and it's scary. We have to admit that it's scary to speak in front of other people and make mistakes, or maybe your opinion sounds silly. It's a scary situation. So we as teachers have to try to make that arena, that environment, a safer place for mistakes and sharing opinions. So if we can move to the next slide. Great. So the pinwheel, the idea is to make bubbles. What we're going to go through for the next few minutes are the 7 steps of this pinwheel framework, and basically what you need to do to be able to put this into your next class. So you can start using this very, very soon. And so we've broken it down into 7 steps, but there are 2 main goals. One is to divide and mix student groups, and the second one is to divide and mix topics. This will make our classes more bubbly, more soap, more air, and hopefully get everyone talking and learning. Here are our 7 steps. We'll just run through the list quickly, and then we'll look at each of them individually. First, we'll learn how to make groups. Then we're going to assign numbers to the individual students in the groups. We'll talk about how we spotlight each individual student in a group. We'll talk about more free discussion that happens. And then we'll talk about how to switch groups. And that's the real key for the pinwheel, is moving the groups. After we talk about this and show a few examples, we'll then talk about topics and how to divide the topics, and then actually rank the different elements of one topic, prioritize them. That helps us to combine them in a lot of different ways. So we can move on. What we're going to show here is the real essence of the pinwheel. What we have here are 9 shapes that are representing 9 students in 3 groups, and we're going to show how they switch around. Now, this is only 9 students, John Mark, but let me tell you, I've done this with as many as 100 students.
Wow.
But this is the basic movement of the pinwheel. It doesn't matter if it's 9 or 10 or 90 or 100. This is the basic movement of the pinwheel. So let's see how
what you're saying is that a really important part of the pinwheel is how students move to different groups.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
All right. We have a video of it, I think, right?
We do. And as soon as we can see that, we'll see. And what I'd like you all to do is, when the video starts, keep your eye on number 1 in the green circle. So we've got a group of circles up at the top. Keep your eye on number 1. You'll see it just moved clockwise down to the right, and then it moved clockwise again down to the triangle side. You'll notice that the green shapes are all moving in a clockwise motion. This is going to be very important. You'll also notice that the yellow shapes are doing the exact opposite. They are moving in a counterclockwise motion. So greens are going clockwise and yellows are going counterclockwise. And you'll also notice that the red shapes don't move at all. The result of this, and it's really important to get this exactly right, is that with every switch, completely new groups are formed. So the students are in completely new groups after every switch. So anything that they have done that was old is new again because they have a new group and new contact with new people. That's a key point for the Pinwheel.
Fascinating. We have a question I wanted to run by you. Daniela wants to know about student age. Can it work well with different age groups?
Absolutely. I've done this with kindergarten, very young students, and I've done it with adult learners. You know, we talked about humans being social animals. All ages work. We all like to talk to each other. We all like to get to know each other. And social media shows us that even in this computerized age, we still really want to be in touch with each other. So Daniela, thank you for the question. And I have had it be successful with all ages and all levels of language also. We're human. We like the contact.
And we like to move.
Yeah, we do like to move, like Kevin taught us a couple of weeks ago. Yes. Okay, if we can move on to the next slide. So, groups. The important part of groups is that there are 3 students in a group. I like 3 for a lot of reasons. One is that 1/3 of the time, each one of the students is talking. That helps us get to those 7 minutes. If we have larger groups, we have fewer people talking as much. I actually, though, I like 3s more than pairs because that dynamic with 3 people, you can have different kinds of more complex disagreement and different opinions, and you can have small alliances or things like that, or people can be outvoted. And so it makes it a bit more dynamic. But 3 is really nice. When I see bigger groups, I usually see that if we get 5 or 6, they break off into 2 groups. And then these 2 separate groups are not really talking to each other. So they're not really sharing with the idea. So I like groups of 3. Sometimes we have to have 4s, but for these kinds of activities, I really like groups of 3s. Another key point here with the groups, very, very, very important. If you're going to move your desks and you're going to have something like we have here with these 3 groups, keep the center empty. Keep it like a circle, because otherwise, when the students are changing, they might get lost and confused where they are supposed to go. So keep the center empty. Also a really good place for the teacher to stand and be able to observe all of the students. So these 2 points are really important. We can move on. Now, we number the students. So in every group, we have a number 1, a number 2, and a number 3. The teacher can decide on who's number 1, who's number 2, or they can do it themselves if they're a little more reliable with that. But it's important that each group has a number 1, a number 2, and a number 3. And it's very important to tell them, you keep your number all day. It doesn't change. You're always number 1 if you're number 1, and you always switch groups clockwise. If you're number 2, you're always number 2. Don't change your number even when you move, and you always move counterclockwise. This helps keep the pinwheel efficient, and we don't go into just craziness, people bumping into each other. So it's really important to practice, to train your students. Number 1's always number 1, number 2's and number 3's don't change their numbers ever in one class.
Peter, I think also that will make it easy for students to get used to the activity more quickly. If they know, for example, 1 to always go clockwise, the next time you do it, someone's a 1, you don't have to tell them the instructions again. They already know because they're experienced.
Exactly. That's a very good point, John Mark. It does simplify things. And actually, when you've got a class of 30 or 40 or 50, in your mind, you're actually dealing with just 3 students. Number 1, do this. Number 2, do this. Number 3, do this. And you don't have to think about 30, 40, 50 students. You only have to think about 3 because they all do the same thing. And then you switch groups and they're doing the same thing with a new set of members.
Well, and Edmund is asking very quickly, does it have to be 3 students or can you use other group sizes? I remember you saying a little bit ago that 3 is optimal. Sometimes you have to have like 1 or 2 groups with 4, but if you can stick with 3, stick with 3, right?
Yeah, I really like the dynamic with 3. Of course, this is for the pinwheel. At other times, you might need to use larger groups or smaller pairs or the whole class, of course. But I find that with this contact learning, getting lots of talk time, 3s are really a great number. I found it better than any other number.
And then Hasmik from Armenia wants to know, is a 45-minute lesson good time to fill a pinwheel activity? Or is there a different duration you recommend?
Well, I will say that it probably takes a full class period for your class to get used to this.
Mm,
But once they know how to do it, and it's really simple, but they do have to be trained a little bit. Once they know how to do it, then the teacher can use it when they want to. They can just say, okay, quickly groups, and the students know how to go into the groups, just as we showed. And then we can say, number 1, share your homework. Number 2, share your homework. Number 3, now switch groups and share your homework again. And then maybe only half the class is used this way. But once they get trained, the efficiency of the class really goes up.
got it.
Good questions, though. Can we move to the next slide, please? Spotlight time. We've talked about this a little bit, but just to be very clear, every student is going to have some talk time. What I like to do is I like to have the students actually stand up, physically move, stand up, and one person in the group is talking. The others are not talking, and they are listening very carefully and sometimes taking notes. But number 1, stand up, introduce yourself, or share your homework. Number 2, number 3 are watching, listening, maybe taking notes, but not talking. This is number 1's time. And it's very important that the teacher gives a time limit, maybe 1 minute, maybe 2, maybe 3, it depends on the activity. But all of the number 1s will take exactly that time limit. When we say start, number 1 is talking, and then when we say stop, they stop, and number 2 goes. But don't let them finish early and don't let them go later, because that helps equality in the classroom. Everybody is talking the same amount of time. People feel that that's fair. If the good students, better language, are speaking longer, it feels a bit unfair, and it doesn't work as well. So it's really important, keep number 1s and number 2s and number 3s all speaking the same amount of time.
Well, and Peter, just to clarify, for spotlight time, if I'm speaking in my group, I'm only speaking to my group mates, right?
Yes.
And same thing is happening in all the other groups too. So I'm not speaking to the entire class, right?
This is true, yes. Good clarification. Each group is talking at the same time. So we have to, again, train them not to talk too loudly, because they only have to talk to the people that are very, very close to them. It works well. Again, I've done this with 30, 50, 100 people in the same room, but they're talking just to each other. That way, if we have 7 groups, 7 people are getting their 1 minute at the same time. It becomes much more efficient. If only one person is talking out of 30, there's no way that we'll get 7 minutes for everybody in one class.
And then, but let's say if I'm student number 2 and a student number 1 spotlight time, what am I doing?
You're listening very actively. We all know a little bit about active listening. That means eye contact. You're listening, you're not talking, you're paying attention, and the teacher really has to train the students to do this. Sometimes you can even give them a little quiz and say, what did your group members say? And they have to show that they were listening carefully. But it's not only polite to listen to others, but it's going to encourage others to speak if they feel they're being listened to.
Got it. Thanks. All right, what's the next step?
Okay. After spotlight time, we have the discuss time. This is a little less formal. Everybody is sitting and they can talk a little bit more freely. This is a good time for feedback. So for example, if number 1, number 2, number 3 individually shared their homework or their opinion, now they can all share their ideas together. Oh, I liked what you said. Oh, can you tell me a little bit more like this? So this is more like free talking that we often do. So spotlight time and discussion time are different. One is more formal. We stand up. We might even clap when somebody finishes. And discussion time is a little bit more free. The teacher can decide how much time for either of these. It's also a good time. Oh, no. We can keep moving. That's fine. Let's talk about the switching of the groups. We have talked about number one, moves clockwise. Number two, moves counterclockwise. Now, when we're first training the students to do this, usually after a couple of classes, they can do it very, very quickly. But in the beginning, sometimes I'll say, number one, stand up. You will move. Which direction? Clockwise. Okay, take your finger, point to the group where you're going to move. And so that we can check to make sure everyone knows which way to move. Number two, stand up, point to the group you're going to move. It sometimes takes students a little bit of time, but we don't want them to get lost and bumping into each other. So it's really important that everyone knows exactly where they're moving.
Well, this is interesting. So what about multi-level classes? I mean, I think just about every class is a multi-level class, right? But how can
Yes.
you use a pinwheel to address multi-level challenges?
That's
This
a
is
very
a
good
question
question.
from Edmund, by the way.
Okay, good question, Edmund. One of the things, it's going to happen that we're going to have students of different levels in the same classroom. It always happens. What I try with the pinwheel to do is to give equal time to everybody so that the people that maybe are not in the higher level, they still feel a bit equal. They get to talk as much. One thing that I'll notice is that when you get to switch groups, you get another group of people, so you probably end up being a different level. Maybe in this group, you were one of the lower ones, but then you switch again and you're one of the higher ones. So you get to move in one class period, being one of the higher or being one of the lower. And that's really good for all of us. If you're stuck in one group, then you're always in that same position. Maybe you're the higher one and you always have to do the talking, or maybe you're the lower one and you always feel a bit shy. But when we move around, multi-level, but we have lots of opportunities to be in different levels, I find that really helps the students talk.
That's great. Well, and also Sergio says using a small group for speaking is a fantastic idea. He says that having a small audience and building confidence by only speaking to a couple of peers, he loves it. I think this is one of the magic elements of small group work that your pinwheel is kind of adding to a bit, right?
Yeah, small group work is great. I think that so many of us use it. I am just trying to add a little bit more energy into it by having small groups that get to mix up within one class. So when I walk into a class as a student, I know I'm going to talk to several different people. And actually, I don't know who they are because it's not going to be just my close friends. I'm going to move around. It adds a little excitement to every class. Oh, who am I going to talk to next? You don't know. It adds some excitement and variety to classes.
Love it. Thanks.
Okay, can we move to the next slide? We'll move a little quickly through the next couple of slides so that we can get to the end. But as I said before, I've used this with a large number of students in the same classroom. Just keep that same basic structure and you'll be fine. If we can move to the next slide, we can actually see a short video that shows how that works. Just very quickly, pay attention as you see the shapes moving. You'll notice the ones move clockwise, the twos move counterclockwise. This is a group of 23 students, and if you watch them move, there it goes, and they're in all completely new groups. You'll also notice that the number fours can switch like every other time, and they can just switch places so that the number 3 and the number 4 are not always together. But you'll see that they all switch. After a couple of times, look, they all go back home again. That's a key element, that you come back to your original group. Then you get to share what you've learned in your travels. let's keep on moving very, very quickly. We can show a very quick video of one of my classes. In this class, we have my students doing the pinwheel. You can only see a few of them, but there are actually about 23 students in this class. They work together in their small groups. This is an entire class in about 20 seconds. And they work together in small groups, but they switch groups. And even though, and I have them working on something on the little whiteboard, they work together, but then they switch groups, and then they continue to work on that idea with different groups. And when they get back home, they put their answers up on the board, and that's a time where I can check them. A lot of teachers say, well, what about checking what the students do? This is just one way. Use the pinwheel, they write their ideas, put them up on the board, and then we can all share them and all check and see how they have done.
When you say, Peter, that when they get back home, that means when they return to their original group, right? That's when they put the thing on the board, right?
Their home group, I'm sorry, not leaving the class going home. But yeah, when they get back to their home group. Yeah.
And we have a quick question. This is a good one. What do you think, this is from Daniela, what do you think about doing the pinwheel for an icebreaker?
Yeah, it's great. I use the pinwheel sometimes if I'm giving a presentation with at a conference or something. I'll use it so that people can very quickly meet a lot of people, because so often we're shy about talking to new people. But as the authority support, I can say, okay, you're all going to move around, and it's something that we actually like. It does break the ice. I like that phrase. So it can be used that way. I also use it for learning, for going over peer review, for presentations, things like that. But it's a great icebreaker as well. Good point.
And then what if we can't move our desks or chairs, Peter?
Yeah, let's quickly move to the next video, actually, because I sometimes have my students give their presentations in a computer room. And the computer room, as you can see, has fixed desks. They don't move, the computers don't move, but I do the same thing. What I usually do is the students against the wall are number 3, so they don't really move very much. And then number 1s move forward and number 2s move back. So it's the same basic principle, and they can all actually give their presentations in one class 3 or 4 times. And every time I do this, my students always improve the second, the third, and sometimes the 4th time they give the presentation. Unfortunately, in a lot of classes, students give a presentation, but they only get one chance to do it. This is an opportunity for lots of students to be all presenting several times, and they get lots of feedback from different members of the class.
Well, Peter, Paul Daniela Diana says that it looks a little bit complicated and is worried that students will become noisy. Maybe some will work, others won't. Keeping an eye on them, watching them. What do you say to that? Because when you watch the video, it looks a bit complicated, but I guess it gets easy the more you do it.
It does, it really does. That basic thing of 1's clockwise and 2's counterclockwise, that's really it. It's really quite simple, but we do have to train the students. But once we train them, they can move very quickly. I usually have them practice the first time so that they can be up and in new groups in under 10 seconds. I'll say, okay, everybody, let's go, 1 and 2, switch, and we time it until they can do it. It looks a little crazy in that video because that's more than 1 hour, all in about 20 seconds.
Sure. And then we have a question very quickly from Bello in Cameroon, who's watching on Zoom. Is there a maximum number of students you can do this with? As many as 80? You said you've used it with as many as 100.
I have used it with 100 because basically the students, if they switch 2 or 3 times, they're only interacting with a group of about 9 or 10 students. So that's happening within a room of 100 students, but they're just moving within that small group. they're meeting 6 different people. If they meet 6 different people out of 9, okay, but if they meet 6 different people out of 90, it's still the same thing. So it doesn't really matter how you do it. It's just that everybody understands their role. Number 1, clockwise. Number 2, counterclockwise. Number 3, stay put.
So then it sounds to me like if you have a lot of students, like 80 or more, you don't necessarily, you're not going to visit every single area. You might visit the first 3, the first 4, the first 5, and then go back to your home group, right?
Exactly. The same principle for just 9 or 10 students goes for 100. You only really need to present or share your ideas 2 or 3 times, and meeting in a small group with 6 or 7 different people. That's enough. It doesn't matter. You don't have to meet 90 people. You can just meet a few, and the students still have that same kind of energy. Actually, when I have those very big classes of 90 or 100, it actually feels really small because people get to know each other, and the energy is like they're just all with their friends. So yeah, it works with any sized group.
Got it. Well, we have about 10 minutes left, Peter, so let's move on.
Yeah, let's move all the way to Doris if we can. We'll kind of skip over this because we can just kind of show what Doris is doing. Because Doris is coming into a class and I've given her an assignment. Her assignment is to think about pets and which pets she likes the most. What I've done is I've given her 7 different choices of pets. This is the dividing of topic that we talked about at the beginning. We as the teacher, we choose the topic, like pets, for example, and we don't just give that to the students and say, talk about pets. What we do is we divide the topic very specifically into different groups, into different elements, I'm sorry. And so what I've done is I've taken pets and I've given 7 different pets. Let's look at that real quick in the next slide. So I took the big topic of pets and divided it into birds and cats and dogs and fish and rabbits and snakes and turtles. And I have then asked Doris to choose maybe her highest pet that she would like the most and her lowest. Let me ask you, John Mark, if I asked you to choose from those 7 pets, which would you put in the high group and which would you put in the low group?
Well, I also wonder what our participants would say in answer to this question. So if you could put your answers in the chat box while I think about my answer, I think I would probably put dogs in the top and definitely snakes in the bottom, Peter.
Okay, that's a great answer, and I'm sure our participants all have a variety of answers. Let me just briefly point out that if you have even up to 100 students, if you have divided it into 7 parts like this, everyone's going to have a different combination of these 7 from high, middle, and low. So that gives each student a sense of an individual opinion about this particular topic. So cutting it into 7 makes it really easy for the students to come up with a unique opinion. We can help them with that by dividing up the topic. Let's see what Doris has done. So again, very quickly, we're going to put this into high, middle, and low. We've already done that. You put dogs on the high shelf, John Mark, and you put snakes on the low shelf. Let's see what Doris does. In the next slide, please. So Doris is going to have contact with 6 other students in the class today, and let's see what she's chosen. Doris likes cats, we know. So the next slide, great. Up in the top half of this slide, we see our 3 groups again, and we see Doris. She is number 1 in the circle group. She's green like all the number 1s, and she's in the circle group. And then we have the 2 other groups. Now, Doris is number 1 John Mark and all participants, can you tell me which direction is Doris going to switch when we ask her to switch groups?
Doris is going to go clockwise. So the direction
Exactly.
of the hands of a clock.
Exactly. Doris is going to switch clockwise. But if we can go back one more real quick, I'm sorry. Let's look down at the second half, the bottom half of the slide, and we can see that Doris, number one, has put cats in the high and snakes in the low. But her partners, number two and number three, they actually have snakes a lot higher. And so they have different opinions, but that's okay. Now we switch groups. Doris moves clockwise.
No, but I see that then Doris's opinion is changing, isn't it? Or
Well,
no?
it hasn't changed much.
Oh, I
Not
see. She just
yet.
moved to the bottom. She hasn't changed her opinion yet.
But she's in a group now where number two and number three, and you'll notice number two speaks first this time. Both number two and number three in this group, they really like snakes. And they actually convince Doris of some positive qualities about snakes. So when Doris switches groups again, please, next slide, we see that Doris has actually changed her mind a little bit. And now Doris has put snakes in the high level because she learned about how snakes might be good pets, and put cats down a little bit lower. But this time she hears again from different people, number two and number three, and they say some different things about cats and snakes. So now Doris is going to move back to her home group. And Doris has kept cats up in her high. She decided that that's a good place for cats for her, but she's moved snakes up to the middle. The thing that I want us all to remember right here is that maybe for homework, we gave Doris the assignment to maybe even write a paragraph about what kind of pets she likes, and she really liked cats. But through the pinwheel, during class time, talking to her other classmates in different groups, she actually developed her opinion. It actually grew and changed, and she had a greater appreciation for snakes. But she didn't learn that just on her own. She learned that through contact with the other students in the class. And this is a very helpful thing for the students to see their own ideas develop. So one of the things that we have here, we show how Doris starts in her home group and ends in her home group, but she actually develops her ideas. Let's go to this next slide real quickly. And this is kind of Doris's journey. Again, if you look at the upper right, Doris's first thoughts are that cats are cute and snakes are scary. Then she moves in with, she's in her home group with Anna and Amir. And they tell her that, well, cats can scratch up furniture and snakes are not really so slimy. This has an influence on Doris. Then she moves to her next group, and Bahar and Butch tell her that other things about cats and snakes. Doris then moves again and then again. By the end, Doris has a deeper understanding of both cats and both snakes. And some people have noticed that this is not only Doris developing, but it's a good way, if Doris ever wants to write an essay, she can show different opinions and how her own ideas develop. And that's really actually kind of the basis of essay writing and even academic writing, is to show how an idea has developed with input from lots of different people. So when people
I love it, Peter. So Hasmi Dilbarian says it's a great way of teaching our students how to negotiate and present opinions successfully. And you know what I see is that it's one topic and you get to talk about it with different people the whole class period. But the most incredible about it, I think, is that the student's own opinion can change throughout the entire activity.
And you know, I think that that's a lot more realistic, because in life, our own opinions change based on who we have contact with or what we read or something. So why make the classroom just kind of one opinion being pushed onto the students when they can actually experience their own opinions developing? That's really one of the very key things of the Pinwheel. If we can move on to, I know we're short on time, but I would like everyone to really remember that if we want to keep the pinwheel working, remember this basic structure, that we're going to have them in groups of threes, empty space in the middle if possible, and ones will move clockwise, twos will move counterclockwise, so that we all get to share and develop our own opinions and ideas in small groups, lots of spotlight, talk time, sharing of ideas, developing of ideas, and hopefully using that instinct that we have that we really love to be in contact with other people and with new people. Let's look at our last slide. It's a sketch that one of my old students, Yuka, she drew a sketch that is her expression about how our classes work. Can you and any of the participants see anything in the sketch that you remember from what we've done today?
Well, I wonder what our participants see, but I definitely see lots of students talking at the same time and sharing their own opinions.
Absolutely, yes. You can see in the front there, we have one student standing in front of a couple others and showing, you know, their different opinions. And time's important. You see the timepiece there, the sand hourglass, and you'll see that lots of other groups exist in the background. Lots of people are talking, and if you'll notice on the right-hand side, that's the teacher blowing bubbles, always trying to keep our classrooms full of good soap, student, original, abundant production, and lots of good air, where they are attracting intergroup respect. So we're keeping our classes as bubbly as possible.
Wow, Peter, thank you very, very much for being with us today. This has been incredible. I think this is really practical. It's really easy, and students are going to love it. So we really appreciate you being here today, taking time out of your schedule to speak with us. Wonderful work.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all the participants for coming in today. That's really great. It's really great to see such proactive teachers. Thank you so much, John Mark.
You got it.